Hi, this is Kathleen from Syracuse, and you're listening to fellow Northwestern Wildcat Dana Balter on Two Broads Talking Politics.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, it's Sophie from Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here with my co-host Kelly. Hey Kelly.
Hey Sophie.
And today joining us is Dana Balter. She is running for Congress from New York's 24th District. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Can you just sort of start off by introducing yourself to our listeners? Who are you and how did you come to be running for Congress?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I am somebody who came to politics very late in life. I grew up with a younger brother who has cognitive disabilities, and the early part of my life was really focused on things like education and disability services. You know, as a child, I learned early on what it's like to have somebody in your life, to love somebody who struggles with access and opportunity. And when I first graduated from college, I went to work at a disability services nonprofit as an educator. And through my work there, became intimately familiar with a lot of the larger barriers that society has constructed that get in the way of people's success. And what I realized was no matter how great our one-on-one services were, if we didn't address those larger societal barriers, the people that we were working for and serving would never have access to the full range of success and opportunity that they should. So I became really interested in public policy as a way to identify and dismantle those barriers. And I went back to graduate school and studied public administration, and was very happily doing that for a long time. And then, I was teaching at the university level. I was teaching public administration, policy, democracy, citizenship. And then Donald Trump happened. And that was a real turning point for me. I saw things happening in this country and to this country that I couldn't abide. And my first reaction to that was to become a community organizer. So I joined a local group of activists, and we worked really hard to try to fight back against the policy and the rhetoric that we saw coming out of Washington that was really dangerous, we felt, to our community and to our country, to the people that we loved. And part of my work with that group was to try to persuade our congressmen to stand up and fight back against those things on our behalf and be a strong voice for us in Washington, D.C., insisting on protecting freedom and democracy and American values, and especially standing up for the most marginalized among us. But our congressman is not that person and made it clear that he wouldn't be that person. And when I finally understood that he wasn't going to change, I decided that we needed to replace him. We needed someone who was going to stand up and be a champion for the people here at home, and who was going to fight on the side of right, even when it was hard. And I decided that would be me. So I jumped in to run against him, and we came really, really close to winning in 2018. And now I'm back at it, and we're going to get it done this time.
This sure seems like a district that should be flippable, especially in a presidential year with higher turnout. Can you talk a little bit about the district, what it comprises, what sorts of people live there?
We are in a truly spectacular part of the country. Not that I'm biased or anything, but I think that Central New York is one of the most beautiful parts of the United States. We border the Great Lakes. We have the Finger Lakes. We have tons of farmland and forests and parks. It is really spectacularly beautiful. We also have an urban center in the city of Syracuse, which is where I live. that is incredibly diverse and rich in culture. We're a refugee resettlement city, so our population in the city of Syracuse really comes from all over the world, and that has made this city an incredibly rich place. You can, go out to a restaurant and get food from just about anywhere in the world, and that's pretty fantastic. And we are a place that has a really rich heritage in terms of American history. We were at the forefront of all the major movements for justice in this country, the abolition movement, the movement for women's right to vote, the movement for environmental justice. We are home to the Onondaga Nation that had a great influence on the writers of our Constitution and made real contributions to the formation of our national government. So it's a very special place. And one of the things, in addition to all of those things, what I love about it here is the incredible sense of community that you feel, which really has been unlike anywhere else that I have ever been. There is something about this place that just grabs you and holds on. And the people are incredibly nice and incredibly hardworking, and there is a real sense of connectedness that I think is not only wonderful to live in, but also really necessary for us to be able to make progress as a community and as a country.
What are some of the issues that people are talking to you about as you're going around and campaigning?
The issues that people are talking about have remained pretty much consistent over the last couple of years, I would say. The number one issue still that I hear about everywhere I go is healthcare. I have talked to people all across my district who are really struggling to access healthcare and to pay for healthcare. So a good portion of our district is rural, and in our rural communities, simply accessing a doctor is a challenge. There are lots of places where people live and there are no doctors, there are no health centers. And that in and of itself is a huge challenge. It's particularly difficult with regard to certain kinds of services. So we have been really devastated by the opioid crisis here in central New York. And we don't have enough treatment services available for people who are suffering. We've got some great organizations doing that work, which is very difficult and very important, but there's not nearly enough capacity to serve all of the people who need it. So, and mental health is another prime area where we are under-resourced. We don't have enough service providers. We don't have enough service centers. And we have to change that. We've got to make access available to everybody. But even folks who do have access to care are struggling to pay for it because healthcare costs are so out of control. And I hear from people in lots of different circumstances about this, right? People who don't have insurance and therefore can't get healthcare because everything would be out of pocket and they can't afford that. I've heard from people who do have insurance, oftentimes through their employer, right? So they're considered among the lucky ones in this country. But they still can't afford care because deductibles are so high. I talked to a man who told me that he's had insurance for years, but he hasn't been to the doctor because his deductible is $4,600. So when we look at the statistics, we think, oh, that guy's in the good category. He's got coverage. But in fact, he doesn't have health care because he can't afford to see a doctor. So we have got to deal with those costs. And the number of people that I talk to who are making choices between buying food and buying medicine. I talked to a young woman in high school who told me, she has type 1 diabetes and She told me that in the past year, she's lost 2 of her friends with type 1 diabetes because they couldn't afford their insulin. Those kinds of things should not be happening in this country. We're the richest country in the history of the world. There is no excuse for making your ability to get healthcare dependent on your resources. But that's what folks all across our district are facing. And so far and away, that is the number one issue that people talk to me about.
So this is, basically a swing district. You came very close to flipping it last time around. You would expect that the Republican incumbent would be fairly moderate. But in fact, he votes with Trump a lot. 538 analyzes these and his Trump score is very high. Do you get the sense that the people in the district feel like he is out of touch with the values of the district?
It depends who you ask,
Yeah.
right? So obviously, a good number of people do feel that way already, and that's why they didn't vote for him. He had won previously by very, very, very large margins, more than 20 points. We now are 2.5 points away from flipping the seat. And I think that change shows how much more awareness and understanding there is among voters in this district that he is out of touch with our values here in central and western New York. He claims to be a moderate, but his voting record shows that he is anything but moderate. He voted for the tax bill that has done such harm to so many hardworking families across this country. I know in our district, it has devastated a lot of people. I've talked to young families who've seen their tax bill go up by as much as $3,000. I've talked to people in retirement. I talked to an 85-year-old woman who, after getting a surprise tax bill in April, was left with $10 in her bank account. And at the same time that our neighbors are struggling with the impact of the tax bill, we watched the top 60 corporations in this country pay $0 in income taxes. In fact, many of them got tax refunds. And I think it is abundantly clear that that kind of policy is simply not fair. It is not the way that we should be allocating our resources. And, John Katko is one of the people who voted for that bill. And he told us that it was going to be good for us and that it was going to bring jobs and that it was going to lower people's taxes. And now that we've been through tax season and we see the results, we know that none of that was true. The folks here in the district are really angry about that. Not only angry about the policy, but angry at being lied to about the policy. And I think that anger is justifiable. John Katko has said publicly that if he could, he would vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. He opposed the universal background check bill, right? That is not a controversial piece of legislation. 97% of Americans support universal background checks. John Katko doesn't. He takes money from the NRA, so I guess it's not a surprise that he would be opposed to that. But those are just a few examples of how he really is upholding this far-right agenda that is wildly out of touch, not only with our district, but with mainstream America.
What are some of the things that you learn when you're running for Congress that it's helpful the second time? What are some of the lessons that you've gotten in being able to start earlier this time that you think will help you?
Well, I think starting earlier is going to be a tremendous benefit. There's a lot of hard work that goes into a campaign, and I think the more time you have to do it, the better. Although I am sympathetic to those folks who say they wish elections were only 2 months long. I can definitely understand that. It's one of many reasons why I support getting money out of politics, by the way, because I think that would shorten our election cycles considerably. But the way that I look at the process of campaigning for an election is I am talking to the people of my district and asking them to put their trust in me, to choose me to represent their best interests. to carry their voices to Washington, D.C., to make some very hard decisions and cast some very difficult votes on their behalf in an effort to make their lives and their communities better. And that is a very personal thing. I think your vote is one of the most personal things that you have to give. And for me, what that means is I owe it to the people that I'm asking to vote for me to be accessible to them, to show up in their communities and in their neighborhoods, to give them the chance to look me in the eye and take the measure of me and decide whether or not they can trust me, whether or not the vision that I have for our communities lines up with the vision that they have for our communities, and whether I'm the person that they want working for them in Washington, D.C. And we have, over 710,000 people in this district. So unfortunately, I can't talk to every single one of them, but I want to speak to as many as I possibly can. I want to show up in as many places as I possibly can, and that takes time. And that's, to me, why having a long campaign matters. It means that I get out and I have the time and the capacity to talk to thousands and thousands and thousands of people across the district. I think that's what I owe them as a candidate. It's what I will owe them as their congresswoman. And the process of doing that makes me better able to do the job, because I get to know more people. I get to hear more of their stories. I get to understand more of their experiences and their challenges. I get to hear directly from them what they want and need in their representative. And that better equips me to do the job. So I'm very grateful for the time and opportunity to get out there and talk to folks.
After the 2018 election, you founded a nonprofit organization called Enter the Public Square that intends to help build civic engagement in your community. Can you talk a little bit about that work and the importance of civic engagement in the United States?
Sure. I think this is something that I learned through the process of campaigning last cycle. It really, I guess maybe not new ideas that I learned, but it reinforced for me some of the things that I thought coming into the election about people's level of engagement and desire to be engaged. I talked, of course, to thousands of people across the district, and one of the common themes that I heard over and over again from folks was that they were very dissatisfied with what was happening in their community and in their country. And a lot of people would say things like, I feel like I need to do something about it, right? Like they're frustrated just watching it happen. They want to do something about it, but don't know what to do. They don't know where to go or who to call or what action they can take or how they, as an individual in their living room yelling at their television, can do anything to make a difference. And I completely understood that frustration, because for a little while after Donald Trump's election, I felt like that. I felt like I had all of these intense feelings about what was happening, and the overriding feeling was frustration because I couldn't change it. And it wasn't until I joined this group of activists that I started to feel like, actually, we can change it. Maybe we can't change everything all at once, but we can make a difference. And the way we do that is by exercising our voice, finding a way to get involved, banding together with other people, and working collectively. And so after hearing from so many people across the district that same kind of frustration and the lack of understanding about where to go or what to do about it, I really started thinking about how we could address that. And in a nonpartisan way, right? This is not about winning elections or supporting candidates. It's not about pushing a partisan agenda. It's about figuring out how can we help individual people get engaged in their communities in whatever ways make sense for them, are comfortable for them, around whatever issues matter to them. And so we created this organization to try to do that. And the idea is to help build skills that are necessary for civic engagement, things like media literacy and group problem solving and deliberation, right? Those are skills that are very, very important for being engaged in community and living in a democracy. We also want to facilitate access to government so that people have a better understanding of what their government does for us. And one of the ways that we do that is through facilitated town halls, where we bring together members of the community and members of local government, whether they're elected or appointed, to talk about what the government does and how residents can better engage with and influence government. We do skill building workshops, and this summer have started a program with the local Boys and Girls Club in Syracuse to do those skill building workshops with youth, which is very exciting to me. And so this is, the beginnings of this kind of programming. I think it is incredibly important, because the only way that we can make sustainable long-term change in our society is to have people involved. And I really want to make sure that people have the tools they need and the attitudes about civic engagement that will encourage and enable them to get involved, so that we get to the point where it's the people who are shaping society, right? Government is an instrument of the people. And I think we need to take back at the grassroots level some of the power that we have ceded over the years, and re-exert our influence to demand the government that we deserve.
If our listeners would like to help out your campaign, what are some ways they can do that?
Well, the first thing that they could do is go to the campaign website, which is electdanabalter.com. There are a few different ways to support. One is financially, which is always important. We didn't talk much about campaign finance reform, which is a favorite topic of mine. But until we get money out of politics, money is essential for running successful campaigns. So we very much appreciate financial support. And you can donate right online at the website. You can also sign up for our email list, in which case you'll receive email updates and news about the campaign, and that will offer you other ways to engage and participate. And the other thing that you can do from afar is follow us on social media. We are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And that is one of the ways that we get the messages of the campaign out. And every new person who follows us opens us up to a whole new network of people who get to learn about the campaign and can get involved and be supportive. So not only following us, but reposting our content and liking it so that it gets shared more and more is really a very powerful way to help us amplify the messages we're talking about here, which is really, apply across the country. The messages of we're working for a fair shot for everybody. We are trying to return power to the hands of the people and ensure that our government works for us. And that is a goal, I believe, that we share with committed Americans all across the country. And we'd love to have them join our team.
All right. Well, Dana, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I'm very excited that you're running again. I think this is one of the districts people really need to be paying attention to. And for anyone who's listening who is a Northwestern alum, and I know we have some listeners who are, go Cats, and we should support Dana, a fellow Northwestern alum.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your having me. It was wonderful to talk with you.
Yes, you too.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.